The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. We're going to be talking about art and science of policing. We're going to be talking about communication, how to be effective. And you don't need to go very far to find a trainer that will recognize that communication is one of the key defining traits that any new officer, any experienced officer, any effective leader is going to have to harness and really lean into. And so without further, I just want to welcome Alex Mann to the show. Alex, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to share this, as I've told you in email and before we hit the record. You have a book. You have your policing career, and I'll ask you to introduce that. But we have this book called The Law of Improv, and the subtitle, I suppose you call it that, is Yes and for First Responders. And I don't know if a lot of listeners will have the same type of reaction I did, which is like, okay. But for me, I like to think I'm more in the lane of, or on the side of, okay, tell me more. I'm curious. You have my attention. But I will say, as I read into the book and I was taking avid notes and dog earing it, sorry, it's a good book, but I made it a little ugly for my own purposes. There's a lot I'm really excited to dive into. But before we peel away the book and get into that, can you just introduce yourself, give us a little crash course of your career thus far? But there is so much meat in here that I'm excited to share with the listeners.
So I have been with the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office in Massachusetts for a full 28 years, going into my 29th, which explains all the gray. Essentially,
You've earned the gray.
Oh, I've earned the gray. It's my stripes, like of being a sergeant. So in that time frame, I started doing stand-up and improv comedy just as a kind of a bucket list thing. And what ended up happening was I started blending the humor. I was already using humor inside the jail to de-escalate things and being able to communicate. It's kind of hard for a 300-pound murderer to want to kill you when you just made him giggle. Like, a giggle takes a lot of steam out of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, when I started doing stand-up and improv, I got into acting. So I've been a background actor in a lot of movies. And it's been an interesting way to divert from the stresses of the real job, which pays my bills. But now I actually have to pay taxes on being a comedian, which, that's a whole nother can of worms.
It's a good problem to have. It means you're a professional. You're getting paid.
I can't deny it anymore. My accountant laughs. I got to add author now. But what I realized was that communication skill set that we learn in the academies, that's not something that we review on an annual basis. It doesn't really come up. The IPC or the verbal judo or whatever anyone wanted to call it, we don't train that. We always go back to the duty belt. We go to policies and procedures. We don't train how to communicate. And for those of you who've got that amount of time in your careers like I do, it was shock, awe, be the big voice. And that even amplified just after 9/11, where everything was now a threat. And in that time frame, the things that have changed for us is that the amount of people who we're interacting with who are on the spectrum or who are in a drug detox or in a mental health crisis, and sometimes a combination of those three, you're running into that will not work with this person. And then now you go straight to this use of force where people are getting hurt. And we're always going to need that, right? I'm a big guy. I can go hands-on. I have no problem with that concept. I would much rather have maybe 3 seconds of trying to see if I can connect with you to de-escalate you, to get you to just comply and come with me.
Yeah. You said a lot there. The first part I want to go to is a little shout out to your own maybe life balance, maybe your work-life management, to lean into this bucket list thing, explore this passion, this interest, right? Comedy, acting. I just got to see Dr. Kevin Gilmartin in person after knowing him my whole career, knowing his work, I should say, my whole career, and finally not having a schedule conflict. So I'm glad he's still taking the show on the road, but that's his big thing, right? Like, be aware of the ustas, like the things that you used to do. And there's so much in your book that I really like, and you've even hit on some of the prongs there, which is communication in the old way. And my point is not to disparage the old way. I think a lot of ways we were trying to do the best we can, but we have come a long way with tangible, practical de-escalation tools. We train that better. We talk about a different version than ask, tell, make, right? But there's a main point in your book where you talk about, kind of what winning is, and you said it right there, right? Like, yes, you're a big dude, you're strong. I really leaned into fitness because I was like, I have to be, the most apt version of myself to work patrol and run a dog and all that stuff. But there's something really powerful about using your brain and having your brawn in case you should need it. But that brain is not just like trying to outsmart someone, but it's just trying to be adaptable, which is a huge tenet of your book. Can you talk a little bit more about that sense of winning that might be more in the old school traditional policing culture? Like, what does winning look like and where does it get us into problems?
So winning used to just be confronting, controlling, ending. And now in the world that we're in, there's probably a camera in four different directions at you the whole time, whether it's a body cam, ceiling, dash cams, cell phones. There's these devices now that are seeing everything. And everything kind of gets broken up into the worst case scenario because that's what gets the clicks. But if there is
Hmm.
footage of you using your brain and tapping into an emotion to say, hey, it's okay. Like, winning really needs to be, did I use every possible way to end this solution peacefully in a way that the community cannot really condemn me for? There's always going to be somebody who wants to pick apart what you said or what you did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when people see you actively de-escalating, they're not gonna turn on you as fast when you do have to go hands-on. They're gonna be like, "Well, you had that, you earned that moment." And, sometimes they know the scenario better than you before you got there. So, like, when you come on scene and it's like when you walk on scene in an improv group, you don't know what the audience or the scene is gonna give you. And that happens. So sometimes somebody knows that person is on the spectrum and just had a family member die or their pet died, and they're now in a mental health crisis. So you have twofold. So what is winning? Winning is now physically controlling that person, or is winning being able to connect with that person to get them to comply? And to me, I'd much
Yeah.
rather compliance and self-chosen compliance than having to force you to.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's like basically in simple terms, because there's a lot of newer people or prospective cops that listen to the show, but it's like, how do you make the situation slightly better than it was before you got there? And a slightly better version is no violence was necessary, no force was necessary. Of course, it's not for the naysayers that probably aren't listening to the show anyway. It's not to say that there aren't going to be times when people they do force your option. They limit what you're able to do. But a lot of times you're really just getting at like, how can I look at this adaptively, right? How can I offer something different when safety isn't compromised by doing this thing? And that's where I really appreciate you starting off with outlining how policing is an art, not just a science. Because I'll share, although I came from I'll say like I was a kid that really loved creative art. I loved, art and music growing up. The more I leaned and grew into quote unquote adult life and quote unquote professional life, I thought those things could not really coexist in a practical, responsible way, being brought up as, a Chinese American kid with expectations to go to med school. And so while I shelved that, I looked at policing like a science and I studied the books really hard and I was really rigid. I was really rigid as a new officer. I was really rigid in field training, and that was almost to my demise in field training in first phase until I took it less seriously and I let myself be myself and I took risks talking to people, right? I chummed it up sometimes. I made fun of myself, and that's where I became a lot more successful, and that continued to grow on and on. But I think that that is the point I really want to illustrate for a lot of those newer cops that come in, and they're really rigid and robotic. But most seasoned veteran officers, corrections officers, even EMS and fire that have to de-escalate people, they would say, yeah, don't be a robot, be a person. You're talking to people here.
Then, and the flip that is, the academies, they do their best. They have a short window, they have a turnaround, and they need people
Hmm.
to understand the basics and hope when you have an FTO or you're doing your training in the field that that kind of comes out. But realistically, it's your most new officers, whether it's, police, fire, corrections, EMS, whatever they are, they have that blinder up for the first 2, 3 years, and they can't see the gray yet because they haven't experienced enough of that interaction. So, and this goes back to why improv to me is so important. It teaches you not only patience with your surroundings, but it teaches you patience with yourself. It teaches you how
Hmm.
to listen to what am I saying? What am I feeling? And am I presenting that properly? Because if your facial expression shows a negative attitude, but you're like, hey, it's okay, but they don't match, whoever you're interacting with is going to see that and they're going to react to what they see because that's the warning sign we're used to. Like, that's what we're genetically engineered to us from when we were living in caves, that what am I seeing versus what am I hearing?
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I've talked about that before where again, as a new officer, yeah, I was rigid and I was pretty stoic and I tried to be and act and look tough and a lot of it wasn't super effective, like trying to posture up against other people. Ultimately you do what you have to do, but that doesn't start us off in this flexible space where we can choose your adventure to where this call goes, right? And that's where I think what you're talking about is where we've evolved and we're continuing to evolve in what people might call reality based training. But some of the best scenarios I've seen as of late are when a situation can go a number of ways and the role player may know a couple of responses and to be adaptable, maybe based on the trainer's cues. If the officer of the officer, the person going through the motions, is actually employing some of the things you talked about, right? If they are using an empathetic tone, if they're offering options, and maybe this is a good example to bring up your story, your actual experience with the dragon, right? Because it does let you go quote unquote off script, but that's the thing, that's life. Like you're not painted into these rigid things. Like you can influence the script as it goes. Yeah, you're not writing the whole story, but you can make amendments and for the people with an acting background, right? You can put in blocking, right? You can decide where you're going to walk, and that's literally what patrol tactics are. Like I'm going to walk here where I have time distance shielding, not over here where I'm exposed. But yeah, you want to intro that
Sure.
dragon story, and I think it'll help illustrate the point.
So I'll preface it with policy and procedure gives you all this host of things when something is happening and what you're supposed to do, and it gives you that checklist. So here's the scenario that happened in real life. We were going through a period we were struggling to try and get new officers in. The hiring was down, so the ones that we had were very, very new. And this one particular inmate that we had was threatening self harm. He was in a forensic cell, standing on top of the sink. So he's not going to really. He's not going to kill himself, but he's definitely going to hurt himself. He could hurt blood, he draw blood, maybe break his neck or something. But so he's standing up there and he's yelling, which is now echoing. Everyone who has already gotten there before me, they're barking their orders like, get down, what are we going to do? You can hear it. And now this noise level just keeps getting louder and louder. So I just kind of walked my way through. And as everyone is now kind of like planning, okay, so we're going to go get the move team and all these other things going on, I just walk up and I just tap on the window and I'm like, hey, where's the dragon? And he says, what? I says, well, where is it? Because I can't see it, but you can. So is it a green dragon or a red dragon? He says, well, it's a green dragon. I went, good. I'm allergic to red dragons. I can get you out, but you're going to have to tell me where that dragon is. And the way this is going to work is I need you to back up to the door so I can handcuff you, but you got to keep me safe. You got to tell me where that dragon is at all times. Can you do that for me? And, this took a little bit. But yeah, he got down, he turned around, he cuffed up. I got him out the door, and as we're walking him to put him into the restraint chair, one of the new officers says, how the hell did he do that? And one of the captains says, well, Alex is just a crazy whisperer. But what I really did was, and this is an improv technique, you tend to match your scene partner's energy. But if you're already at a 10, I can't go any
Hmm.
higher than that. Like you're already there. So then the reverse needs to happen. So I'm quiet. The quieter I get, he has to match that because I can't hear his echo. So then I'm also agreeing there's a
Hmm.
dragon. I know there's not a dragon. But to him, there is. So why am I going to argue that point? He sees it. So once I acknowledge you see it, I don't, and it's a dragon, so that's serious. Can you keep me safe if I get you out? And now all of a sudden it's teamwork. I made him invested in my safety to get out of that cell. And the best part was is
Yeah.
he's out and we're putting him in the chair. He's just apologizing to everybody. They're like, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to pick that apart a little bit more because yeah, in improv, you're trying to match, but then in patrol work, in corrections work, you're not trying to match if it's high. You're trying to bring it back down, right? You're trying to reach an equilibrium, and maybe for improv, the goal is synergy, it's teamwork, it's also being entertaining to a prospective audience. But in this scenario, the goal is safety. The goal is no violence, right? No injury that might have been self-induced, right? And so you think about where those goals intersect, and you were able to not truly. And I know that there's some thoughts that are like you don't want to indulge someone's delusions, but at the same time, I can think of a specific example of an officer when I was newer, and he would spend shoot, like 30, 40 minutes, like trying to out logic somebody's delusions. And I think the word on the street was he was trying to get out of paper calls because he could just talk to someone that was having a hard time, like a crisis. But he was trying to like out game him with his game. But like, you're playing a different game. Like, so what are we doing here? And I love how you recognize that. And you're like, hey, I'm not going to help you unbelieve there's a dragon, but I can help you believe that I'm trying to help you, which is the really really true critical part. Like that is the thing everybody there wanted him to climb down and not hurt himself, right? Do you need to you need to restrain him, remove him or whatever. uh, and he similarly wanted to not be hurt. His thing was a dragon that you did not see, right? So I love how you were able to, in real time, just develop this pause, right? And we talk about de-escalation, like what a pause just to be like, hey, where is it? And the dude's like, you're with me, you're on my team.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're acknowledging someone else's reality. And I think this is where, the basic rule in improv is always yes and, but people tend to think that means I'm agreeing. You can say yes and still not be in agreement. And I think that's a fine line for some people because they just go by the textbook definition of it. And it's not always that way. I'm saying yes and I can't see it. So that means you do, and I'm agreeing it's okay. How do we move forward? And this happens a lot. And I think people think improv needs to be funny. And yes, when you go to like say a whose line is it anyway? Yes, you're going to be entertained. You're going to get a laugh. But the basic of any improv scene, whether it's on stage doing a comedy show or as an actor, or in this case, first responders, you're creating a scene where you both can work together. If it happens to be funny and you have a laugh, where I've used that in moments where it was never an intention to make you laugh, but we found something funny, I'll roll with it if that's one of the things that helps. But the goal is to find a better way to communicate and maybe understand a little bit. And let's just say I couldn't get him down, right? And we had to go in and move him. Well, now there's video of someone trying. There is evidence. So when we go and write our reports, people will be like, at the time I was an officer, Officer Mann stood at the door while we were getting ready and was engaging in conversation, got the person to admit they were seeing dragons and attempts were made and couldn't. What is going to protect you more when you go to court? Having that kind of a moment where somebody says, yeah, that did happen.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that, right? We talk about adaptability and improv; they're one and the same. And I know I opened with communication being this key trait, but more and more, like when people ask, whether it's recruits or prospective cops, like, "Hey, what is the thing that agencies are looking for?" I'm like, man, outside of integrity, adaptability, right? Like, and you think about what the CAD, what the calls, like what emerges through your day. You can have the perfect patrol day or the perfect day in the corrections facility all mapped out. Yeah, I'm going to do my walks, I'm going to do my checks, and then I'm in the control room, and then everything's going to go smooth. I'm going to get to watch my show. If it's the middle of the night, right, in control room, but no, that's not how it works. You get this thing happening, like you didn't plan this. You didn't plan someone to go into an episode, or you didn't plan to, find dope in someone's cell, but then you got to pivot, right? And that's what patrol work is, and that's what life is. I mean, I had plans the other day to hang out with my daughter after school, and then she went over to her friend's house. I'm not just going to sit there depressed. I'm going to make something of my time. I'm
Yeah,
going to
that's a
pivot,
kid
hang out with her
move.
later, right? And so that's like the name of the game.
I think the
Yeah.
hard part is that it's we don't want to be seen as being too flexible because then you're perceived as weak, right? So then how do you find that balance? And I think your willingness to allow input where it's somebody's trying to express something, it's not completely unreasonable, and that comes with a little bit of experience.
Hmm.
But the hard part is we don't create scenarios where this can happen. And I know AI is now moving into it and they're doing like first person shooter games and it's virtual reality and stuff like that. But improv in training gives you an opportunity to be wrong in a safe space where everyone in the room can go, "Oh yeah, okay, that wasn't," but you don't shame the person who made the mistake. You kind of go, "We can learn from this." Or hopefully what happens is you have this great moment where somebody used that ability to stay flexible and still situationally aware. And that's the best part about to me for improv is that you're always aware of your stage presence, you're aware of everyone else's stage presence, but you're always listening and watching and being able to be flexible and react and match that or de-escalate it or go higher. But we don't train that enough.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said about taking that risk, and that's kind of what I'm rephrasing in my brain of like, hey, I'm in improv. I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to say this thing. Ooh, it didn't land. But then you have people on stage with you kind of course correcting it, right? Like they're meeting you. They're not just be like, oh, that was dumb. End scene, right? Let's try again next week. No, you like work with it. And I mean, what I visualize is vulnerability. Like you're going to take a risk. You have to open yourself up to do that, but that's the same thing as, and I know you talk about this, but teaching improv and the concepts therein to leadership, right? How often is it a boss? I've been that boss several times. I say something, it doesn't land right, but I appreciate sometimes I ask for patience. I'm like, hey, like I'm going to think out loud right now on the fly. And I say an idea, and my subordinate or my peer is like, I don't get it. And I'm like, yeah, it didn't sound as good when I said it out loud. But then we talk through it and we come up with a pretty cool plan, a pretty cool concept. So that's kind of what comes to mind because that goes right in line with the yes and power. Because how often have you heard that from one of your peers or your boss where you have this idea and you're passionate about it, and it might be on a call? Hey, what if we did this, Sarge? And he's like, yeah, no, but and so no but versus yes and what a difference in being collaborative versus shutting someone
I'll
down.
give you another real world scenario where I work. The day shift and 3 to 11 shift are run by lieutenants and up. But due to staffing, and it was a Super Bowl, not this year, Patriots lost it, but whatever, the year before, I got forced. That's all right. It's,
Sorry. Sorry,
Drake,
bro.
maybe not, but so I ended up being forced to be the shift commander. Now, mind you, this is now the first time I've had to run the shift. And everyone was just kind of like, he's running the shift? And they're like, well, at least he's been around, right? So I know the basics, but I've never had to tell people I'm now in complete charge. I walked into roll call and I went, yep, this is weird for me too. We got to get through this night together. We have certain things that we can control. Everyone's going to want to watch the Super Bowl. So statistically, we know everyone's going to behave, right? So let's use that to our advantage. Do not pick
Mm-hmm.
arguments. Don't worry about if a bet isn't made. Like we're gonna relax a little bit here, like because I am in charge, but I have never been in charge. So we need to work this together. If you have a problem, reach out to your zone supervisor and then get to me. Like we're gonna do this. You're going to see me a couple of times tonight just to walk through because you need to have that extra moment where you have access to me. And at the end of it, at the end of the night, I sent just the officers who were working that night an email saying, thank you. We got through it. My first time being a shift commander, and I appreciate everyone's efforts tonight to keep it a quiet night. I look forward to doing it again with all of you. And like that, like people were like, no supervisors ever sent us an email thanking us for getting through the night.
Thank
But that
you
was an
for doing my
acknowledgement of,
job.
I
Wow.
knew it was weird. I'm walking in. And so they were like, how's this going to go? And I wanted to set the tone off right away. Like, I got you. We're going to get through this. This isn't the end of the world. It's weird, but yes, we'll do this.
Yeah. I mean, that's humility, right? Like we all know, and I was this like new sergeant or acting sergeant. I'm like, man, everyone's I gotta know what I'm talking about. I gotta make all the best decisions. You put this weird pressure on yourself, but then meanwhile everyone's watching, like, what's happening. But then it's that key back into your earlier point, which is the power of introspection, like really knowing where you're at, not just internally but in your environment. And I think that that's such a tenet to just living an effective life. Like, you got to know how you're going in the
I
context of
agree. And I
things.
think there's an added perk when you do things outside of the job that can improve your ability to do the job. Is one, maybe it's something you're going to do when you actually retire, but building a skill set that isn't connected to being a first responder oddly somehow amplifies a moment when you are on the job. And if something happens, and all of a sudden you have a bit of information from this real world that you're in that can now be utilized. And for me, being able to create something in a moment with a team of people and have a few laughs or going up on stage and making people laugh, that's a high. It's phenomenal to me. So talk about you have daytime stress, but then I get to go do this. That's probably why I still smile when I walk into job after 28 years. Like I still like my job.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me think about just like keeping it light, right? The power of humor. Like, who doesn't want to laugh? You talked about like the huge, super angry, amped up guy and making him giggle. Like, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to just like lighten up and just like go the smooth course, like bring some humor into things? It just makes me think about like just the power of not taking life so seriously, and how we're in a very serious career field. We see a lot of like bad stuff, and a lot of bad stuff happens right in front of us, and sometimes to us. But at the same time, like, we can either just sit in that and wallow and we get jaded and all these things that we know to be true, or we got to be intentional and really have that potent, like, kind of antidote to what we're experiencing to counterbalance us, bring us back up to some
I agree.
semblance of
It's
normal.
being able to have that breath. And I think that the thing with humor is that people misunderstand things. And the perfect example is you're at a wake or a funeral and someone giggles and then people get mad. Well, that is a normal release of anxiety. It is a healthy output
Yeah.
of letting those emotions out and not keeping them in. And for the most time, like we are in situations where you have to have your emotions in check because if you're not going to think clearly, and you're going and bad things can happen to you, your partner, and then your family or your friends will have to deal with that and suffer from it, right? So being able to self-regulate is so important.
You train for the threats you can see, but what about the ones you can't? United Diagnostic Services brings hospital grade diagnostic technology directly to first responder agencies, making early detection of cardiovascular disease and cancer more accessible than ever. UDS provides comprehensive early detection programs using advanced ultrasound, CT calcium scoring, stress echoes, and innovative blood panels to identify potential health risks long before symptoms appear. It's proactive, on site, and built specifically for those who serve. Early detection saves lives and careers. Learn more at udshealth.com.
From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232.
But if you can't find a moment to laugh, like you're not a robot. Don't act like one.
Yeah, man, I'm getting this really like clear image. I spent years on our civil disturbance, basically our riot control. But we had this one guy, he's just the biggest. People kind of called him like our own local Arnold, right? So you can picture the physique of this guy, but such a teddy bear, right? But he was the guy you could get him in training. But if we're doing this type of protest training scenario, he just had such a hard time like keeping a straight face, right? So people would be up in his face, the face shield down, and you could see it, like the corner of his lip is twitching because it is discomfort, right? Like you're trying not to smirk. And again, it makes me think of just the allegory of being ultra rigid, where eventually the pressure builds up and it cracks. And like, I have seen in very tense scenarios, and I've told stories like that before, where it wasn't violent, but there were people just chipping, at us on the line. And a different buddy, he just started talking to him. He's like, "Hey, we're not that way. We're just trying to keep the peace. We respect your rights to free speech." And she's just like, "Holy cow!" She's more f bombs and this and that, and basically trying to get the crowd to attack this guy who is willing to talk to her like a person. And the crowd actually told her to shut up because they wanted to talk to us. They wanted to hear our perspective on things, which was, hey, we just want everyone to be able to express themselves, go home without anything damaged, no one hurt, right? But it totally shut this instigator person down, and really, like, it allowed a moment of humanity, some
And
empathy,
that to be able to,
which
in
is really
that
the goal
situation
here.
of a riot or a civil disobedience moment, to one person is going to try and amp it. And then this officer was like, "Yeah, that's not gonna work. I
Mhm.
wanna talk." And for the rest of them to now turn
Mhm.
on someone
Yeah.
who is on their side of the protest and go, "No, no, 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 we wanna hear that." Like, that's the win that we talked about earlier. What is winning? And that is community engagement, where
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, a large group of people went, "We did what we wanted to do. We were heard. We were also protected, and we had a moment where we actually bonded with the police." How many people get to say that anymore? It always feels like everyone is against you, or they're so for you that they're blind to when someone does something wrong. So I think that's a great moment. That's a great story.
Yeah, man, everything that we're talking about, it's getting me really excited because last night I was just talking offline with a local guy. He's been on the show before. His name's Matt Porter, but he is the regional dude for de-escalation training, emotional intelligence training. He's an active SWAT TL. But really, all these things, like, he was kind of sharing some of his background, and he's like, "Yeah, policing came easy to me. Like, I just, it's all tactics came easy. It's all like action reaction, and oh, this happens, then we do that." And comes from a sales background, right? Which is totally improv, right? You're pivoting, you're seeing a challenge, a new a block, and you overcome the block, or you navigate, you find a middle ground. Like, you're continuing to try to work the problem, which is what a lot of tactical analytical thinkers in policing do, right? In first responder work, they look at it very concretely. And I think what is really exciting for me is, like, at face value, and I think people have defeated it if they've listened this far in, but at face value, you hear improv, you're like, oh, that's like artsy stuff. That's entertainment. But it's the same. You have a problem, you're gonna work it, you're gonna work around it. And like the active listening, all these components that are fortunately becoming more commonly understood, I think, in just general society, like, what does effective communication look like? But it's like, really, like, it's problem solving in real time. It's something that PIOs have to do. It's something that, the brass have to do when they're at an angry community meeting.
The
It's
interesting
it's
thing
all
for
the
me
above.
has been when I published the book in November, I started promoting it. I initially was looking at improv groups and law enforcement groups because that was a natural space for me. And the ones who gave me the most friction were the improv groups and not law enforcement. Like law enforcement, and I think it's because when you say I've got 28 years, I'm currently a sergeant. These are all the things I've done. There's a hint of credibility, and so all of a sudden, and there are forward-thinking people of, "Oh, this is another technique that I can use in my tool belt." The improvised
Mhm.
community, like, I met such resistance right away, and they were like, "No, this is ours. How dare you give it to them? They're fascists, this and that." And instead of arguing with them, I would literally yes and. I said, "Okay, you think are all everyone in law enforcement is, bad, and they're
Mm.
not paying attention, and they don't listen, they do all these bad things. If you believe improv is a key form of communication, don't you want them to start learning it? Because once they learn it, they're now listening, they're observing, they're allowing what you're saying to happen. They're meeting you at that space." So I got a good chuckle out of it. But now the switch has been great. It's way more embraced by a lot of people who, when I came up through, started jumping in and saying, "I know Alex. We knew this book was coming sooner or later. He's had this workshop idea for a long time." But then it branched like HR people. I have an ER nurse who's done a podcast with me. I've
Mhm.
done people who are in mental health clinicians. Like, it's amazing how this one concept for what was improv and first responder training blending hit home with so many people. And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I was in the right place at the right time, I guess."
Yeah. Yeah, you have your key communities and you have your audiences. At the same time, a good idea is a good idea, and the best ideas are those that are not commonly from our industry, right? I think that's where some of the sharpest leaders in first responder work, they learn from business, they learn from world history, they learn from generals and doctors and whatever they can get their hands on, whatever they can get our mitts on. man, that fascist thing is funny because it's like, you know what would fix fascism? Probably some humor,
Nope, that's
probably
all right.
some
That's great. I'm
improv.
glad it was on camera.
Sorry. For those that are listening, I just made Alex almost lost his drink. Yeah. But no, that's the thing is like I think about I got a family friend and on his guitar he's got like a sticker and it says like this might have been like reiterated from now I'm thinking, is this like a Bob Dylan thing? But like
Yes, that
this
is a
machine
Bob
kills
Dylan.
fascism or something like that, right? Like art and music, right? And I know it might generate some eye rolls from certain parts, but you're like, guys, no one wants fascism. But that is literally the rigidity. I say this, you do it, or you jail or die, right? Like that's not this. So I love the
Well,
irony
I
baked into
expected
that.
to meet some resistance, and because it's a new idea. And so the weird thing was, like, I went to Google and chat and said, "Okay, here's what I've done. Can you please help me find my network? Like, who is out there?" And when Google and chat say, "Nope, you're the only one," I went, what do you mean?" I was like, "Okay." And the closest that comes up,
Time to
and
work.
you and I talked
Roll
about
them
this
sleeves up.
before we came on air, is Improv. Second City in Chicago does this with the Chicago PD on their command staff level, and they run a scenario based kind of situation to help them interact with their supervisors and their line officers. My idea is just taking this even broader, and imagine being, and I get like community leaders who are responsible for the budgets are going to be like, well, how much is this going to cost? Well, it costs nothing, because if you're in a major area or even a mid-sized area, there's probably an improv group either at a college level that would be more than willing to come in and sit down and go, hey, we'll work out a workshop. I think what I
Hmm.
like about the book that I wrote was I'm giving both communities the language they need to talk to each other and almost permission to say this works because of my experience. Now, the other thing is you're always going to need that big Arnold guy, right? You're always going to need somebody who can knock down the door. You're always going to need that person who's like an MMA expert who knows how to do joint locks. I'm not saying we need to get rid of them. What I'm saying is we need to balance our teams better. Do you have those people who are trained and who have a natural ability
Hmm.
to see the moment differently than everyone else? And instead of ostracizing that or suppressing it, let's give them a little bit of extra training.
Yeah. Yeah, and you give that example, and it makes me think of years ago, I was, I wasn't super new. I was comfortable in what I was doing. I was either a field training officer or canine, but I was still pretty rigid in my thinking and approach, right? But it took a different kind of big Arnold-esque dude, just a specimen, right? But we're in this apartment, and he's talking to very obviously the victim. And I'm not trying to like to have people suppose and picture why this isn't a safe thing to do, but there were a couple of us there, and this person is emotionally just, not like elevated, but just sitting on the couch really low, sobbing. And he gets down on his knee and he takes out his notebook and he starts talking to her really softly. Very effective, great communicator, very adaptable, lots of improv. At the time, I was like, oh, I guess certain situations maybe we can take a knee and talk to somebody on their level or lower than, because standing over them is something no one likes. But my rigid academy training was like, you just don't do that. What if someone just, takes your flashlight and clocks you over the head with it and then game over? So that's one example. But the another example, and no one of right mind will tangle with that guy, myself included. Another example, much more recent, is I told the story before on here, but if there's one person, maybe a couple in my whole department, closer to 200 officers, that I would not want to tangle with physically, it's this guy. He's also north of 40 years old, but just a strong, solid dude, wrestling background, DT trainer, but with someone in crisis and needing to go to the hospital, like, it was involuntary commitment criteria, ITA, it was this person basically his conditions of getting on the gurney and getting strapped down was just make me laugh or laugh with me, right? And I can think of a lot of places where officers ain't gonna laugh. Like they're like, no, I'm not laughing, get on the thing. But this guy like kind of led this chorus of all the other officers kind of looking at him, making eye contact. It's like, all right, here we go. You guys ready to laugh? I'm gonna laugh, and he's gonna laugh, and he's gonna walk on. And he literally did that. He asked for them to laugh because they were seeming way too serious. And this is a serious guy, but very adaptable, great communicator, right? And so he's just like, well, this seems like a win. So he starts laughing and gets the other junior officers to laugh with him. The guy walks right on. lays completely passively. They strap them down, good to go. But again, just another example of bridging communication, adaptability, that team aspect, and really like what's best for the community, and that's
So
the
that
public, that's
reminded me of
officers, that's
a
everyone in the
scenario, and
middle.
I haven't really told this story publicly. A few people know it. We had a custody at a hospital, and he was on drugs or something, but I want to say he punched out a window, and so his hands were cut up. So he was pretty compliant. He just was. We were waiting, and in any ER, you're always just sitting around waiting. And the thing you kind of empathize with is I understand the hospital wants us tucked away so nobody sees us. But then that means we're tying up a room when there's now people in a hallway. And there was an older lady. She had been brought in from a local nursing home. She was scared, nervous. She had some signs of Alzheimer's or dementia, and she just was nervous, and she just kept trying to talk to me. And I'm looking at my partner, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And there happened to be the cart that has all the blankets and pillows and towels and stuff. So I just grabbed a couple, and I
Hmm.
made this like makeshift little dog, like a teddy bear. And I went, "Hey, we're going to be leaving soon, but can you wash this for me? Can you give him a name?" And then all of a sudden you just saw her soften. And she was no longer worried. She wasn't like nagging everybody who walked by. She now had something to focus on. Mm. I thought I got away with it, right? Thought nobody saw it except for my partner and the inmate. And all of a sudden this nurse comes over and she goes, I can't believe you did that. What made you think of that? She's just needed something to focus on. Like, and I'm like, if you make me cry in this hospital, woman, I swear to God. But it was such a moment where literally that was an improv thing. Like, how do I help that person in a way that I can? And I didn't leave the custody,
Hmm.
like he wasn't out of my sight. I didn't leave my partner, but I settled a problem that kept
Yeah.
wandering into us that now all of a sudden settle the problem for everyone else around us. And that's where flexibility in your thought works. Like, yeah, okay, I got lucky, like that worked with her, but nobody else thought of it.
Hmm.
Man, did you have a background in
Nope.
hospitality?
Just
You're making like pillow
I'm a
and
dad.
towel animals.
I'm a dad. I have 4 kids,
It's
and
impressive.
they're all pretty happy and healthy. And I think it was just the dad in me. And I had a grandmother who had Alzheimer's, so there was empathy. Right, I'm in full uniform. I've got my gun belt on. Right, I've got to look the part for everyone around us that this guy's not getting out. But that 30 seconds it took me to fold up the couple of the towels and hand it to her, and just show an ounce of gentleness to her, settled it for everybody. So it was.
Hmm.
I think that comes from just being flexible in the moment and still being situationally aware.
Yeah. Yeah, this is off script, but you seem to me like a very balanced individual. We talked about you going back into your pursuits, as far as comedy and engaging in that and becoming a pro now, like having this other career and this other passion and pursuit. And then you're writing, you are a father, you see this opportunity, and that's some of my training, like wellness focus and mindset focus, but so many people always see as obstacles, right? It's just how we're wired or rewired because of this challenging job. But for so many people, they just find a way towards opportunity, right? You saw this thing and you're like, here's an opportunity. Here's something I can fix. Were you always that way? Or would you be able to credit what helps you towards
I
that
think I've always had
constructive,
moments
positive
where I've
mindset?
tried. I remember my mom used to work as a home health care aide for senior citizens. So I had some experience dealing with seniors. And so, Lord knows, and I've got the body to show it. I've gotten a lot of free cookies over the years, right? And I was no different when I first came on the job. Those first few years, I was rigid and I needed that. And it was, the supervisors who had been there for years who were just getting annoyed with like, oh, he's writing another report. He's not. Well, he's right. I mean, they broke the rules, so the report's good. But like, and that's when I started seeing like, how do I find that gray area? How do I creatively discipline and keep you in the housing unit with me and make you suffer? Like, if you're gonna act out just to get away from me, well, the real punishment is making you stay with me. So I just got creative about it. It's a
Hmm.
hard balance sometimes, especially inside a correctional
Yeah.
facility. You can't allow that kind of an emotion all the time, but there are times where you just have a human moment, and I'll walk in and we'll have an inmate and he'll be like, "Oh, hey, Sarge, how's it going? How you doing today?" And I go, "Another day denying my ex-wife her happiness. I didn't die, so I'm here." And they're like, what did he just say? He's happy to be alive, right? But
Yeah.
it's a
What
moment
happened
where,
to
like, most
fine? What
people
happened
have
to
gone through a
okay?
relationship
Just
that
move
ended,
on with your
if
life.
not a divorce. So all of a sudden you kind of go, well, my ex-wife isn't happy. I'm still alive. And they're like, okay, like, good to know. So that changes a little bit. It kind of gives them, okay,
Mm,
I'm not a complete hard ass, but they
yeah.
know I'm a rules guy.
Yeah. Well, Alex, I've really appreciated this. This show and this project is so much about featuring all kinds of insights and ideas in this really constructive like way. And I love how not only is what you're sharing and what you've been working on a really tangible, actionable stuff that anyone can use today, whether first responder or not, like on the job or not, but it's truly stuff that I think is good for the soul. And I think it's just good for like the human aspect that we're trying to get through, which is this thing called life. So,
Sure.
Alex, is there anything you'd like to wrap with? And
So
please
the
tell people
easiest
where
way
they
to
can
find
find
me,
you,
it's
reach
real
out,
easy,
and find your book, of course.
alexmanncomedy.com. I have all the social media. The book is called The Law of Improv. That is available on Amazon. Love it. It's only $10. It's only 100 pages. It is a simple read. I deliberately designed it that way so that if you couldn't get me to come out and teach a workshop, but you can reach out to your local improv group, or if you're an improv group looking to do some community service work, this is the bridge that you can use. It sets it up. So if somebody wants to bring me out, I've started doing college lecturing and I teach workshops. And so I teach them at law enforcement levels. I teach people who are in recovery how to do stand up to help them reconnect with their funny. So I have a lot of things I can offer, and I can tailor workshops to what
Mm,
people's needs are. So I look forward to helping out the community and trying to like leave a legacy that my kids will be proud of. Thank you.
awesome. I think you're doing that, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.